I think we should start by setting a context.
Great.
For me, the context is our 5 years or so of weekly conversations. And the pattern that caused me to be interested in doing these was I got so interested in your thinking, and it would have such an impact on me. And I think I think that's how we developed a way of doing this work that was meaningful to both of us. We kept making these discoveries, and it seemed very nurturing. So I think that's what I want to continue today. So the thing I'd like to address today is you often talk about calling. You talk about people's calling and how important it is. And I often wonder exactly what you mean by that. And, you know, with my academic background, I have this problem. I want people to define things, and I don't think it's always wise. I think it's not wise in this case. I think you've been wise to say, no, let's just keep discussing it. And I like that. But I want to put it this way, because I'm getting more and more interested in this issue of what a calling is and what it would mean. I think the older I get, the more I want to pursue that notion. So if I were to come to you and say, Beth, help me figure out what my calling is and how to pursue it, how would you go about that?
Right. Okay. So truthfully, what I would do, can you hear me okay still?
Yeah.
Okay. Is I would say, so I'm going to teach you a practice called the North Star practice. What would you say if I said that?
I would say there is a concept called North Star in leadership development literature. And it's fascinating to me. And it's all about following what moves you most deeply and what you think will guide you when you run into confusion, opposition, and all the things that you do in daily life.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, that's exciting because I didn't know that. And I know you're writing in organizational development, Parsifal's Briefcase. And so I'm like, oh, how exciting. There's this thing. And who knows how many years ago I might have heard that. I know that I have invented things that later on I find 20 years ago I read. So for me, calling is this line that you can draw from something over your head, a North Star, into the 3D that grounds us into our calling. The calling grounds itself into us in a way. And so I would say, okay, we're gonna visualize that, and we're gonna see what your calling tells you it is. It's very personal. And I've been loath to share this outside of my Claim Your Calling course, where I know I have, in a sense, a captive audience. I have someone who is so hot to follow their calling, they'll do sort of anything to learn from me, and they'll leap the imagined hurdle that I imagine that they have to something like the North Star practice. But with you, I've never talked about this particular thing with you.
Yeah.
And the reason that this podcast is so exciting to me is that you're helping draw out my ideas and make me feel less of a freak, make me feel like there might actually be something to my ideas. So one thing a calling is not necessarily is purpose. It's not particularly vocation, although they come from the same etymology, calling and vocalizing. They come from hearing something, but I had a person who told me he saw his calling. He didn't hear it. It's not teleological. It is from deep inside, and it is given to us to grow us as we grow it. It develops us as we develop it. So my purpose may be coaching and consulting. I'm pretty good at those things. My calling, specifically as I've understood it, is to teach calling, is to be a voice for calling, whether I'm paid or not paid. And so you're helping me do that. And this podcast is helping me do that. And the people listening are helping me do that. So that's what I'd first say is I have no idea what your calling is, and I don't need to know. My job is to tune you to calling, to tune you to your own calling. It's hubris and silly for me to get in the way. I want to get out of the way. And then what I do is teach people to follow it.
That's interesting, because I think one of the roadblocks I've run into when we talk is my resistance.
Mhm.
And I think we've always got to deal with our own resistance. I mean, it's a natural thing that we resist. And it's a lovely thing to take a look at it and to understand it better and to respect it. Because I think we all kind of know what calling is, and I think we know what our calling is, or we have a clue about it. But it seems, I don't know, it seems risky.
Yes, it's totally risky. But what are you risking when you think about it and you think into your resistance?
Well, right now it's different. So being older, and the issue isn't what will I do for a living. But I'll tell you a brief story about that, and it's about a time when I had someone help me identify my calling. And one of the things that seems clear to me is other people can help you identify your calling. I had a cousin named Charlotte who I talked to all the time, and she's the one who, whenever I would ask her for advice, she was older than me, and from the time she was a teenager, I just thought she had figured a lot of stuff out in life, and I would ask her for advice, and she would always say, "What does your heart tell you?" And it was really interesting. And one day I called her and I said, "I've just gotten hired to do consulting at an incredible think tank, and I'm really excited." And she said, "Really? What does your heart tell you about that?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking forward to it and everything." And she said, "Tony, you come from a long line of teachers. You've been a wonderful teacher. Your father was a wonderful teacher. Why are you walking away from it?" And I said, "Oh, well, I don't think I am." And she said, "Then turn your consulting into teaching." And I did. And it was incredibly rewarding. And I realized once I started doing that there are ways in which your calling is going to come over you, and you're going to start doing it. And you might as well know what it is and give it permission to move. And I think that's a lot of what you have in mind.
Yes, that's exactly what I have in mind. And there's so many buts that come up that I love working through with people. But how will I make a living? How will I monetize it? And I mean, I've done some work for Spiritual Directors International, and I feel like monetizing your calling that's especially a question that has come up in that. The idea of calling is real to folks, but monetizing it gets really mushy. And I'm like, you might not monetize it at all. Take that, like capitalism for me is just a accretion. We can take that out. There can be plenty of money to be made along here. And if you're properly organized, in my book, you can follow your calling here. And there might be connections, but they're not necessarily the same thing. And it just muddies the voice of calling. So muddies it to worry about that stuff.
So what I'm hearing in that is another thing that I want to talk to you in one of these sessions about it, and that is your sense of time and organization, which I just love talking to you about, which is nothing like mine. My my sense of time is quite chaotic. When I write spasmodically, I write chaotically, and then I have to bring order to it afterwards. And I've gotten to love that process. I think with my first book, I loved working with the editor, who was so good at pinning me down and making me go and do it right. And I got so that I completely trusted him. And I think there is something in that for pursuing a calling, I think.
Oh, yeah. The way I teach it, you couldn't really just do it kind of half-assedly. It wouldn't. I set it up so that it won't work, so that it keeps bugging you. So that'll be really fun. We should totally talk about structuring the etheric, structuring time and space and things like that. That'll be
nice.